Luffy is my favorite protagonist of all time. I've grown up watching One Piece for years now, and I have not regretted it at all. From the characters, the stories, the world building, the drama, and even the politics have captured my attention for many years. A lot of shows try to keep a dedicated fan base and try to keep its story interesting for as long as they possibly can, but I feel One Piece does it better than any other. Two main reasons I see talked about constantly for why One Piece is able to last as long as it has and continue to get better is its world building and character consistency. These two components of the story go hand in hand together, with the world building working so effectively since characters stay relevant and influential even after they were thought to be previously complete with their respective story arcs ending, and with the character consistency complementing the world building by giving this fun and diverse cast of characters a fully realized and complex world to explore. This video will focus on the character consistency of one particular character in the story, the character that has been in the story since the very beginning and what has kept the story so engaging for all these years. The character in question is the main character and protagonist of One Piece, and my favorite protagonist of any story I've witnessed, Monkey D. Luffy. Now, in this video there will be minor spoilers for One Piece. I'm not going to speak in vague terms to describe certain concepts that I like. Instead, there will be specific examples that will contain information of events that take place in the story that you might not have seen yet. I say all this because to me, One Piece is not just a story, but an experience. And I want you guys to experience it for yourself firsthand. But enough of that, let's start talking about Luffy. Luffy is a great guy, really. To quickly summarize, my favorite parts about Luffy can be split into three main parts. First is how upfront and straightforward he is. He is very genuine and will speak and act first without thinking of the repercussions. Second is how Luffy is also very creative, with him not only having a very interesting power, but with how he uses and pushes that power far beyond what any person would think if they were to be in his position. However, all that is cool and all, I feel it's all been talked about already. What I really want to focus on, and more personal to me, on why I like Luffy, is the third reason. The thing I put into the thumbnail and title of this video, that reason being how selfish Luffy really is. And not just selfish, but a phrase I made up called selfishly selfless. Now I know that tongue twister of a phrase sounds oxymoronic since those two words are opposite of each other, but it makes total sense to me and hopefully it will make sense to you by the end of this video. First off, let's split the two words and talk about them separately. To be selfish is to care more about yourself than others, and to be selfless is to care more about others than yourself. However, while Luffy is portrayed to be selfless, with him risking his life to help save others, he is very selfish in how he goes about it. This is because when someone is selfless, they usually care about everyone else unanimously. They care about not just their friends and family, but others they might not have as deep of a connection with, like coworkers or even complete strangers. Luffy does not do this. The only people he cares about are his close friends. Every single time Luffy has gotten into a fight in One Piece is when he is protecting one of his friends. To become the Pirate King, you don't need to defeat the Warlords of the Sea or anyone at all. This isn't like Pokemon, where you need to defeat the gym leaders and Elite Four to be champion, but instead, to be the king of the pirates, the only thing you need to do is to find the One Piece. The only reason Luffy fights these antagonists is because of the connections he has with his friends, and only because they were in trouble from those warlords did Luffy help them. At the end of this video, I will go over a list describing everyone Luffy fought, and more importantly, why he fought them in the first place. However, that is very tedious, so I saved that for the end of the video, and instead went to focus on three fights that best describe what I'm talking about when I say that Luffy is selfishly selfless. The first of these is Luffy vs Enel in Skypiea. While going through Skypiea, there are two moments where Luffy sees the effects of Enel's strength and decides whether he attacks Enel or not. The first of these happens just before Luffy, Usopp, and Sanji enter Enel's domain. There, Konos is attacked by Enel, and Luffy does not care too much. He actually cares more about his friends who are taken and are about to be sacrificed. There is even a specific scene where God asks Luffy what he will do now that Luffy knows what kind of person Enel is, and Luffy just says that he will go rescue his friends. He doesn't care about the land and its people, he just wants his friends safe. The second moment is after Luffy leaves the snake's stomach and sees the aftermath of his crew fighting Enel. This is the tipping point for Luffy, as he then beelines it straight to Enel and their fight begins. This contrast between these two moments perfectly describe what I mean when I say that Luffy is selfishly selfless. If any other selfless character had been put in Luffy's position, they would have decided then and there that Enel needed to be taken down when Konos was attacked. However, he doesn't. Luffy just cares about finding his crew, and once they are found, their goal is not to attack Enel, but instead to find the lost city of gold that was shot into the sky. This also leads to some funny moments that further show how Luffy couldn't care less about Enel. At this point, Enel has started a contest to see who the last survivors will be in the war that is happening. While this is happening, Luffy is nonchalantly singing to himself, wandering around in the forest. Luffy is even attacked by a soldier of Enel, and after Luffy beats him without batting an eye, he just continues singing. Then, Luffy is swallowed by a snake, leading to more shenanigans before being spit out, and Luffy finally sees what Enel had done to his friends, finally leading to Luffy fighting Enel. The second of these examples is between Luffy and the Celestial Dragons on the Sabaody Archipelago. This is actually shockingly similar to the events in Skypiea. There are two moments once again, just like in Skypiea, where Luffy is shown the depravity of the Celestial Dragons. The first of these is when traveling with Kami and Hachi. Luffy sees a slave trying to escape from the Celestial Dragons before losing his life. The Celestial Dragons then defile his corpse, and Luffy ultimately does nothing. The second time Luffy interacts with the Celestial Dragons, once again, like Skypiea, this is where Luffy takes action. After Kami is kidnapped and Hachi is shot, Luffy doesn't hesitate for a moment and climbs towards the Celestial Dragon before letting out the most satisfying punch of all time. Once again, these scenes in the Sabaody Archipelago highlight Luffy's selflessness. Luffy doesn't take action when a stranger is attacked, but when the one being attacked is his friend, Luffy immediately charges forward. Not only that, but doing this puts more people in danger. What Luffy does causes an admiral to come, and a ton of carnage and grief is caused to others just because Luffy attacked the Celestial Dragon to get revenge for one friend. Luffy didn't even know that the Celestial Dragon bought Kami, since Luffy came crashing through the ceiling after that happened. It was the moment that his friend was shot that he took action. Admittedly, when Luffy saw the slave from before getting killed by the Celestial Dragons earlier, he did need Hachi to hold him back a bit, but Luffy could have overpowered Hachi and gotten to the Celestial Dragons if he really wanted to. And Hachi stopped Luffy for a moment again when he himself was shot. What's important is that afterwards Luffy chose not to engage with them, but to follow the plan they had already planned, which once again, just like in Skypiea, is a more lighthearted section where they go to the amusement park. Their minds are completely off the situation and the Celestial Dragons, showing how Luffy did not care enough about that random person to get involved with them just yet. The third and final example I want to highlight is Luffy's talk with Jinbei before fighting Hody Jones in the Fisherman Island arc. The scene starts with Jinbei telling Luffy about how to fight Hody. There, Jinbei tells Luffy to wait till the royalty is attacked before attacking Hody, so that way Luffy is seen as a hero and not as some random human beating up fishmen. However, this is where Luffy says the quote, "Hero? No, we're pirates. I love heroes, but I don't want to be one. Do you know what heroes are? Say there's a chunk of meat. Pirates will have a banquet and eat it, but heroes will share it with other people. I want all the meat." This quote is great for many reasons, but the reason I want to focus on is how it applies to Luffy's unique selfishness. While Luffy does say, "I want all the meat" at the end, Luffy also says how he wants a banquet, implying that he does want to share it in a closed setting with people close to him, but not everyone. Basically, Jinbei is asking Luffy to help end racism, and Luffy says no at first. In the end, Jinbei does convince Luffy by saying he can keep the meat, but it is really interesting to see what Luffy really cares about in this scene. This quote from Luffy seems really out there and funny at first, but it holds a lot more weight to it. When I was younger and first going through the show, I thought that Luffy was selfless and wanted to help everyone, so this quote didn't actually make much sense since it both was in character for Luffy to say, but also contradicted his previous actions to me. Luffy was a hero to me multiple times. He helped save many lives all across the world. However, Luffy wasn't doing it for the world, he was doing it for his friends. Every single time he defeated an antagonist, he never really did it for the people of that land, but for his own selfish reasons at first. It was only through his friends did he learn more about the people and culture of the places he eventually liberated. And after learning of the people, it helped fuel the fire and lead Luffy to defeating them. However, that wasn't the start of the fire, it was his friends. This realization made this one of my favorite moments and quotes from Luffy. It helped me better understand and look back on the story as a whole in a new light. No other story has made me do that to the same effect that One Piece had, and it's only because of the intense character consistency that Oda has implemented into his story that this was able to happen. It's this part of Luffy's character, being how he only gets involved when his friends are attacked, that has been consistent since the very beginning of the story, that made it so satisfying to rewatch the show in a different way to see how consistent Luffy really is. This talk with Jinbei is the third and final example I quickly wanted to give on why Luffy is selfishly selfless. Now that you hopefully understand what I mean by the phrase selfishly selfless, I can finally talk about why I even like it in the first place. Looking at things objectively, this is a very negative character trait to have and should be looked down on. However, it's because it is a negative character trait that I like it so much. I'm not perfect and neither is anybody else, and characters and stories are not real, but they do try to imitate and create believable characters that seem real. With that in mind, it makes sense why no character in a story should be perfect, since that wouldn't be realistic. Every character has a flaw, and I really like this flaw of Luffy's. It's extremely relatable, at least to me. In my life, I do want to help other people, however, there are limits to it. I try to help friends and family as often as I can, and I do try to help strangers from time to time. However, I always feel like there could be more that I can do, that I could help even more people. Luffy is a nice reminder to me that I don't need to make everyone happy, that it's totally fine to be selfish and help only those close to you, that you don't need to please everyone or even most people, that real happiness comes from the ones closest to you. How genuine Luffy is, his creativity, and Luffy's selfish selflessness are the three main reasons why Luffy is my favorite protagonist of all time. Alrighty, so since this is the end of the video, here's that list that I talked about earlier when I said I would go through every antagonist and why Luffy even fought them in the first place. This is basically to further emphasize how selfish Luffy really is, and how he only takes action when people that are close to him are affected first. Luffy fought Alvida after Luffy became friends with Colby in order to free Colby from Alvida. Zoro actually fought Morgan, while Luffy fought some random goons. Luffy fought Richie, Moji, and Buggy because they attacked Chocho, the dog, and to free Nami for the time being. Luffy teams up with Usopp to defeat Kuro because he found out Usopp was going to fight all the pirates himself. Luffy fights Don Krieg after he attacks Sanji and the Baratie. Luffy fights Arlong only after Nami asked him to. Luffy chose to not listen to Nami's sister, who explained who Arlong was and how the town was affected since that didn't matter to him. Luffy only cared to listen to Nami and how Arlong affected her before going to beat him up. Luffy fought Smoker in self-defense since he was stopping them from escaping. Luffy fights with Laboon after hearing Laboon's story and wanting to help give the little whale hope again. Luffy even had a fight with Zoro since Luffy thought that Zoro had attacked the people of Whiskey Peak for no reason. Luffy fought against Mr. 3 since he had interrupted and injured the Giants and their contest with each other. Luffy fought against Whalepole since Luffy became friends with Chopper. Luffy fights against Crocodile because of Luffy's connection to Vivi. Luffy didn't fight Crocodile since he is a warlord of the sea, but instead simply because Luffy was friends with Vivi. Luffy's fight with Bellamy is another great example for Luffy's unique selfishness. He doesn't fight back against Bellamy despite Bellamy's constant attacks on Luffy and his pride. Luffy is facing a lot of humiliation in this fight, but that doesn't matter to him. What does matter to Luffy is his friends, which is why, when he finds out that Bellamy attacked Nolan and his monkey friends, Luffy goes straight for Bellamy and immediately gets his revenge. Not for what Bellamy did to Luffy, but for what he did to Nolan. Luffy fights Enel after seeing his friends defeated. Luffy does the contest with Foxy simply to get the old man's dog back. Luffy fights Aokiji to protect Robin. Luffy fights the Frankie family after they attack Usopp. Luffy fights Usopp to ensure the safety of his other friends, since keeping the ship would put all of their lives in danger. Luffy fights Lucci since he's in the way of him talking to Robin, and then really fights Lucci after he hears Robin ask him and his crew for help. Luffy fights Gecko Moria to get his friend's shadows back. Luffy wasn't awake to interact with Kuma at the time on Through a Bark. Luffy attacks the Celestial Dragon after what they did to Hachi, despite witnessing before how cruel they can be. Luffy tries to avoid fighting with Kizaru, Sentomaru, and Kuma because fighting them would put his lives in more danger. Once again, Luffy tries to avoid fighting with Boa and ends up reluctantly fighting for self-defense. Luffy only fights Magellan and the other monsters in Impel Down since they are in between Luffy and Ace. Luffy attacks Blackbeard because he's the reason Ace's life is in danger. At Marineford, Luffy doesn't try to fight anyone but instead runs to rescue Ace. Luffy fights, but ultimately befriends the animals he fought during his 2 years of training. Luffy defeats a pacifista since it's in the way. Luffy fights Hody Jones for Jinbei. Luffy joins forces with Trafalgar Law to defeat Kaido, which leads to Luffy fighting Caesar, Doflamingo, and Kaido. Luffy doesn't fight back against Sanji. Luffy protects himself and Nami against Cracker. Luffy protects himself against Big Mom's army. Luffy punches Sanji in order to get Sanji to say what he actually wants to say. And Luffy fights Big Mom and Katakuri to protect his friends. I hope this list quickly refreshed your memories on how reactive Luffy really is. He never went out to fight anybody, instead he only fought when his friends were attacked first.